Good morning.
A little housekeeping. This past week I got well, maybe it was a week before. Knowing your retired time is a funny way of being fluid. I got a call from a member of Our Savior's Muslim team, and he happens to be the son of a member that I had when I was at church in Manitou. And he told me that his dad's name is Harold Oslin, and he told me that his dad was going to go on an honor flight, and they have this mail call thing on the honor flight, and could we send him greetings? So I shared that with Lynn, and Lynn did her usual thing. She started researching it on the internet, and she ended up getting a box full of mail that you can send to people who are on this honor flight. And she had a rough night last night, and she's not able to be with us today. And so she shoved this box in my hand and says, "Put this out on the table downstairs."
That's where
So
it came
over
from.
there on the table downstairs, I'm hoping that's the table she meant, is some honor flight greetings that you could send to Harold Oslin, or if you have a veteran in your family that's going on an honor flight, feel free to. And she said she shared this with Eventide, you ladies in Eventide. This is her thing, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Today we're going to talk primarily about evolution. Last week we had a question about the missing link, and I answered it a little bit, but today we're really going to get into the missing link. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate some of the real scientific difficulties that we have with the Darwinian theory of evolution. So, to begin with, I just want to reacquaint you, or acquaint you to begin with, of the two basic assumptions that evolution makes. And I've put them on a handout here right at the beginning for those of you, and hopefully you all have one. I tried to put a few on every table. And the first one is natural selection. And this is actually something that we can observe in nature. I've got some more up here if you need. We can observe natural selection, and if you've ever watched a nature documentary about, there's some herd of wildebeest crossing a river in Africa or something, and you can see the alligators are going lunch. Well, what happens if a member of the herd of wildebeest has got a genetic defect? That's the first member of the herd of wildebeest to become lunch for the predators. And that's all natural selection is. Natural selection basically brings death to anything that is substandard. And that's an important part of the evolutionary process. And as I was listening to the service today, Pastor, he was talking a lot about death. And one of the things we have is an offshoot that our Christians are trying to say, well, there's this, and we call it theistic evolution, where there's this way by which, oh yes, God created everything, but he used evolution to do it. But the big problem with that is natural selection requires death. Okay? If you're a substandard organism, natural selection will kill you. And that's the way. Natural selection is the ultimate judge in evolution. Natural selection takes things out. Okay? Well, if death is an integral part of the process of evolution via natural selection, then that means that before Adam and Eve broke the universe by falling into sin, there had to be some form of death. Because you can't have evolution without death. And this is a big problem for people who try to say, well, God used evolution. Evolution uses death. And God said, the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Not before, but the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. There was no death in the world until Adam and Eve broke the world by falling into sin. So natural selection, that part of evolution, cannot work under God's control because it involves death. And that little thought just occurred to me as I was listening to the service today. Started with the children's message and just went right on through. So that's just a new addition that I just added about half an hour ago. Okay, the other aspect is something that I call benign mutation. And just to review, a mutation is basically a change in the DNA that comes about by some accident. Either during the replication process or something, the DNA gets changed and it's got different characteristics. Now, scientists, medical people measure mutations. And all of us right now, I'm fairly safe in saying each and every one of you might have a dozen mutations swimming around in your bodies right now. In 99.999% of the time, your immune system says, oh, you don't belong here, and destroys the mutation. So the mutation isn't long for this world. Okay? So again, natural selection removes mutations. But what the theory of evolution posits is every so often, 1 in a billion, 1 in a trillion mutations is actually beneficial and helps the organism survive. That's the idea. Such a mutation has never been observed. No one's ever seen such every mutation that anybody has ever seen is bad. And if the mutation does survive, it does things like cancer and other problems that we have with our bodies as we grow older. These mutations degrade the body. Mutations tend to remove information from the DNA. But that's the assertion that the evolutionist makes, is that once in a while, and I said benign, and when I say benign, I mean it's either got to be good or neutral. If it could be good or neutral, then the organism might survive, and by natural selection, the organism might get its genetic information into the next generation. Now, a lot of coping mechanisms in natural selection. I talked before about a birth defect in a wildebeest, but insects, their coping mechanism is just to lay hundreds and hundreds of eggs. So when they reproduce, they just reproduce all over the place. And if you come across a sack of spiders or something, there's just hundreds in there. So they just overwhelm the system by making so many. And that's one way of getting past natural selection. Even if 99% get wiped out, enough survive that there's another generation. Camouflage is the way.
Have more?
The thing's able to hide.
We're done.
And so it doesn't get eaten and it's able to reproduce and get into the next generation. So there are a lot of things that help natural selection. And natural selection is a real thing. And it's important that when we're debating this topic with people who believe in evolution, that we stick to the facts, that we're honest. And we have to honestly say natural selection is a thing. But natural selection narrows down the DNA choices. It does not build up. It does not add information to the DNA. Natural selection just says, okay, here's a bad one, it's lunch. Or here's a bad one, it can't even be born, it's dead at birth. And so forth. So those are the two basic postulates of evolution. One, we have natural selection that winnows all the bad mutations out, and we have the benign mutations that actually survive the natural selection process. One of the other things, and I'm going to talk now about something called microevolution and macroevolution. Microevolution, you might say micro means small, small steps. Okay, we've all experienced microevolution. How many different versions of the COVID-19 virus are there? Okay, the COVID-19 virus is evolving. But does the virus evolve into a bacterium? No. When the COVID-19 virus evolves, it evolves into another virus. As the Bible says, it sticks to its kind. And there are other examples. There are birds that show up on a different island that has a different food source, and over time, that bird develops an ability to better take into account the food sources that are available on that island. And so there's microevolution that takes place, but a bird that microevolves is still a bird. Okay, it doesn't suddenly evolve into some other amazing being. Okay. Then there's what we call macroevolution, large-scale evolution, and this is the thing that no one's ever been able to prove, no one's ever been able to show, and that's when we go from one kind and evolve into a different kind. Okay? And I wanted to give you one example of how difficult and improbable this is. And I put that on the back pages of the handout that I gave you. I downloaded this from Answers in Genesis. And basically the idea here is that the current theory is that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And Answers in Genesis said, let's break that down and see all the changes that have to happen for a dinosaur to evolve into a bird. And when you look at all of these, and I'll get into them later, when you look at all of these, you're like, it just can't happen. There's too many things. The probabilities have just sunk down to so close to zero it doesn't make any difference. So, before I start going through that in detail, I want to also talk to you about some of the hoaxes that the evolutionists have tried to pull on humanity. And I've just listed a few. There are dozens and dozens of these hoaxes. Basically, somebody set out to prove something, and they found a fossil, and they say, aha, this proves it, when it does no such thing. Okay. So, Piltdown Man. I imagine some of you have heard of Piltdown Man. This much ballyhooed, hey, this is a missing link. Skull found in 1912 was actually an orangutan jaw, chipped teeth, and a human skull, and they were put together, made to look as though it was one organism. Okay. Nebraska man was based on a pig's tooth. Cardiff giant, the fake-looking giant human, 10 feet tall. Goliath, anyone? Unearthed in New York, the giant was actually sculpted from gypsum.
Wow.
So the guy didn't even bother, he just carved it out. Oh yeah. Why did I include that one? How's that pronounced? Archaeoraptor. That's the way I'm going to pronounce it, and if you think differently, good for you. Natural Geographic jumped over this evidence that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And they even presented the fake fossil, which is actually a composite of two different creatures, before they had to back down. Okay, and then this last one, the ontogeny recapitulates the phylogeny. I said it, I'm not going to say it again. This one is one of the more dangerous ideas that we've had. The idea is that as you watch a human embryo develop, you watch it develop through the various stages of evolution. This has been disproved. We now have the technology to watch an actual fetus develop, and it doesn't do anything like this. It pretty much looks human during its whole development period. I mean, it starts out as a single cell, but once it gets to the point where it can differentiate, you can see arms, heart, lungs, brain, so forth. Everything is obviously human from that point forward, and there isn't this moving from one evolutionary predecessor to the next one until we finally get to the human being. Now what makes this one so dangerous is there are a lot of people who look this and they said, well, if the embryo is in its fish stage, it's obviously not human yet, and so if we kill it, if we elect to abort a pregnancy, that's no big deal, we're just killing a fish. Okay, that's a logical thing that you could draw if this were true. The only thing that's been disproved. And this is just a small sampling of the number of hoaxes that have been brought forth by this. Now, in an earlier session, we talked about the scientific method. And the big deal in the scientific method is that you publish and other people try to tear down what you publish. It's a job of the scientific community to be skeptical of everything that gets published. But many times these people who are evolutionists will publish something and then they won't let the rest of the scientific community come in and examine their samples and their fossils and so forth to see if what they say is true. And so we can't really follow the scientific process because the people are keeping things from one another. Yes, sir.
And of course, they can continue to get funding to do the research.
Oh, absolutely. You can do a National Geographic special on TV, and they'll give you millions of bucks to, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, our neighbors believe it's true because of on National Geographic
Yeah.
or PBS. Or
And they do take excellent photographs. I mean, you got to give them that. And the difficulty is that we have people who are placed in positions of power who will not allow the dissenting voice to come forward. And that's the same problem that people were complaining about back when Copernicus and Galileo were saying that the earth revolves around the sun instead of the earth being the center and everything revolving around it. What do we have? The people who were in power said, we disagree with you, we're going to shut you up. And so that hasn't changed. That has not changed at all. I recently was listening, I don't know if you know what Daily Wire is, it's a podcast my daughter made me aware of. And I was listening to him, and the guy was, the other day he was talking about how the government coerced people like Facebook and Twitter and some of the other social media to censor people who were questioning the COVID-19 treatment. And the really sad thing is, a lot of their questions were right. Kids don't need to be masked in school. Closing schools is about the dumbest thing we could have done. But those people weren't given the platform to talk. So again, this is an anti-science thing. And so this is something that is still alive today, and a problem that we still have today. So let's go over this. And again, this is from Answers in Genesis. And I'm not going to read this in detail. I mean, you can take this home and read it for yourself, all the details, as much or as little as you want. You can do a Google search for Answers in Genesis and you'll still be able to find the website. So those of you who have internet know how to search the web. You can do that. The first thing they bring up is that reptiles are cold-blooded and birds are warm-blooded. Now the question is, how many chemical changes have to take place in the DNA chain to go from cold-blooded to warm-blooded? You know, it isn't just one. There are a lot of processes that have to be brought on board to go from cold-blooded to warm-blooded, and each and every process takes a genetic change to the DNA, and they all have to happen together. That's one of the real problems. When you go from one kind to another, you can't stop in the middle, because if you stop in the middle, you end up with a crippled organism, and natural selection is going to take it out. So to go from cold-blooded to warm-blooded, all the mutations that have to take place in order for that to happen have to take place simultaneously. So not only do you have the very low prospect of having one mutation that's beneficial, but now you've got to have half a dozen mutations that are beneficial. And suddenly we've got something where I could put down a decimal point and start doing zeros for the rest of the class and put a 1 at the end of it, and that'd be the odds of that happening. And you suddenly begin to understand why they've got to have a really old Earth for this all to happen, because if we had a young Earth, there's no chance that all these changes would take place. They do something here called, the next heading is bird hip versus lizard hip dinosaurs. And they talk about that a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. It's just the shape of a bird skeleton versus the shape of a reptile skeleton, and they show that there are some conflicts, and so there's got to be some more DNA changes that take place. And then they talk about the three-fingered hand, but they do the study and they find out that there's a different group of three fingers, and it's kind of like reptiles get like the thumb and these two fingers, and the birds use these three fingers. I'm not quite sure what all that's about, but again, here's another set of DNA changes. All have to take place at the same time. Then there's the avian versus the reptilian lung, and this kind of continues. They have a nice graphic there for you. The first graphic on page 3 is the bird lung, and then the graphic on page 4 is the reptilian lung, which is a lot like ours. This is really interesting. I didn't know this about birds until a couple of years ago. Birds have a completely different way of breathing. The fact of the matter is, flight is a very energy-intensive process. And so the birds have this different way of bringing oxygen into their system that delivers a lot more oxygen into their blood than you would if they had lungs like ours. And so you have this completely different lung. How many changes in DNA do you suppose it takes to go from a lung like ours with the alveoli and the sacs and everything to one that processes air continuously as it flows by? This is actually kind of cool. That means when birds are flying, the air that they're breathing is just going through continuously. And they're just continuously processing the air as it goes in. Much more efficient. Along with that idea of how much energy, a lot of birds, I'm thinking of hummingbirds, they consume their own body weight in food every day. You know, it takes a lot of energy to fly, you know, and they don't look like they're too calorie conscious either. You know, they are really moving right along. Oh, the feather. You ever think what an engineering marvel a feather is? You know, when the bird pushes down, the feathers lock together and perform an airtight seal. So when the bird pushes down, it's pushing down on the air. Then when the bird is up, all the feathers go and provide no resistance to the air whatsoever. So as the bird flaps, it's like lift, nothing, lift, nothing. Do you realize what kind of engineering marvel that is for that to work? And they're trying to say, here's scales, and these scales converted into feathers. And a big difference between scales and feathers. And again, in order for the scales to become feathers, all the DNA changes that take place that convert a scale into a feather have to take place at the same time. Okay, I could fill the board up with zeros and put a decimal point up there and a little one, and it would be worse odds than that. Okay, now there's one thing, and I didn't look at this very important, maybe they cover this in the fine print, but there's one thing that they haven't listed. The bones of a bird are porous. The bones of a reptile are solid bones. Our bones are solid bones. Why?
Weight.
Flight uses a lot of energy, and if you can remove a little bit of weight by making the bones porous, you fly better. How many changes in DNA does it take to do that? And remember, the DNA replication process is trying to duplicate the DNA that's already there. So that's one. Two, if there is a mutation, it's probably bad, and the immune system takes it out. If you get a mutation that actually survives, a lot of times it'll kill the host. I mentioned before, cancer. A lot of cancers are just mutations in our cells that get away from our immune system. Another thing is when a bird is flying, okay, when you and I are okay, we do have to think elevation when we go upstairs or up hills or something, but for the most part, we're thinking forward, back, left, right, or your left, your right. At any rate, that's kind of our coordinate system when we're gravity-bound creatures. Birds, they gotta learn to be able to go up and down as well. And they've got to have the brain power to run all the flight surfaces that allow them to steer where they're going when they fly. So that they can have the precision, so they can fly up to a utility wire and land on it and grab hold and sit there. I mean, a utility wire is a little wire, you know? And yet you'll see a big row of birds just lined up on that thing. Again, that requires a complete reconfiguration of the brain to guide all the flight surfaces, to be able to interpret the visual data. Even a little bird, I remember watching the hummingbirds. We had feeders at our house down in Manitou, and the wind would be blowing and the feeder would be doing this. Well, the hummingbird would come up there just right along with the feeder. Okay, that takes a lot of brain processing power to fly like that. And then when it got full, the little suckers could move out. Yeah. I mean, it was just like, boom, and it just like was gone. And like, where'd it go? It was that fast. And once in a while, I happened to be in the right direction, I could see it. I'm like, that guy's moving like 40 miles an hour or something like that. How do they get the brain power to do all that? That's all. Think of all the changes, the chemical processes in the DNA that have to happen in order for macroevolution to be a possibility. See, microevolution, when you're going from one form of a virus to another form of a virus, oh, it changes this little, you know, maybe they're not quite as virulent, or maybe they're more virulent, or maybe it takes a different antibody to kill them, or whatever. But they're still a virus. And so you're not making this huge monstrous change. But when you're taking a reptile and converting it into a bird, you have to make this massive, massive number of changes to the DNA. Millions, perhaps billions of changes to the DNA, and they all got to go in the right direction, or natural selection is going to take you out. Okay, so that's the scientific, which we should all have, the scientific reasoning behind why evolution can't work. And from what I've heard in the underground scientific community, there are a lot of young scientists, even some who are atheists, are saying this model of evolution just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't. It just can't explain all the different forms of life that we see on this earth. Things like soybeans. What grows on the roots of soybeans?
Nematodes.
What's that?
Nematodes.
Put nitrogen in the soil? So what do? You plant soybeans after you plant corn to replenish the nitrogen in the field, right? Why those two things go together? You know, how is having a dependence on another organism make you a stronger, more likely to survive natural selection situation when you need this other organism to exist? The koala is famous for only eating eucalyptus leaves. That's it. If the eucalyptus tree goes, so does the koala. Is that a strength? And how many other situations are there where we have these two, and I'm forgetting the name for it right now, but we have these two or possibly even three organisms that live together that help each other out.
Symbiosis.
Symbiosis, that's right, symbiosis. Good man. Symbiosis, that's the word.
I get a revelation going on my mind what happens to them. But this natural selection,
Yeah,
if this was actually going on, then living organisms would have evolved to where they would live longer and be able to reproduce their whole, a longer lifespan. And so you would say, mankind, if they were evolving, would live to be 3,000 or 4,000 years old and still be able to reproduce
yeah,
under natural selection.
that's right, that's right. One of the other examples that
We're done.
I recently learned, my daughter started following this dairy farmer in Wisconsin. She lives in Wisconsin. She started following this dairy farmer in Wisconsin, these videos that he puts on the internet. And she said, "You gotta watch this one." So I'm watching it, and he was explaining why he feeds warm water to his dairy herd. Okay? And I learned that cattle cannot digest grass. And everybody goes, "What? Cattle eat grass all the time." Well, in fact, what happens is there's this bacteria that lives in their stomach that digests the grass for them. And so they graze on the grass, get it down into that first stomach, and the bacteria in that stomach goes to work on that grass and converts it into a food that they can eat, and then they bring it back up, chew their cud a little bit, and swallow it into a different stomach. And he says the reason that he feeds his cattle warm water is bacteria works a lot better if they're in a warm environment. The bacteria grows and thrives warm. And then he said, now for you people who are environmentalists and say, you heat up water just for your cattle, he says, no. I have to cool down the milk anyway. So he puts the milk and the water through a heat exchanger. And of course, milk, we all know, milk comes out the body temperature of the cow. And so he puts the milk through the heat exchanger and the water through the heat exchanger, and he takes the heat out of the milk and makes it cold and uses that heat to make the water warm, and then he has his cattle drink that, and that encourages the bacteria to work in their stomachs, and so they can digest better and they produce more milk. And yeah, but symbiosis is one tremendous thing. I mean, that's a real, until that gets really well established, that's a real weakness, because this organism depends on the survival of that organism in order to live. So there are all these things in nature that just contradict what you would expect if macroevolution were the actual way that species evolve here on this planet. So, and that's scientific. And there are a growing group of scientists who are coming up with a different theory, and they're calling it intelligent design. We Christians are all going, we know who the intelligent designer is. Let me tell you about him, you know. But we have to understand that evolution is not scientific. It's a fake science, pseudoscience. So, any more questions?
All I can think of is that the devil must put mental blocks in these so-called intelligent people's minds, because I saw on Facebook where they were discussing abortion, and I saw this nurse that I know put on a picture, this is an egg, then they had a picture of an egg cracking open, this is a chicken. So what she was trying to say is it's okay to abort before the baby's born. And I was about ready to type something, and Terry said, don't you do that.
Just a word to the wise. Don't get in an argument on the internet.
No, I did, but I mean,
Yeah.
I thought, look at that.
I mean,
don't
you'll see
understand.
something,
Yeah.
you'll see something absolutely stupid on the internet,
Yeah.
and you'll be tempted, you know, but it doesn't work because there are too many restrictions. I mean, you just don't have the bandwidth on the internet to,
No.
to get your point
But what
across.
I'm saying, I don't understand the thinking.
Yeah.
You know.
It's evil.
Well,
It's like
let's
you're
see.
saying, it's gotta come from the devil. It's evil thinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's just think about this in a broader context. What is our message? Our message is, I look at my past life, and if I were to judge myself honestly, if I were to be brutally honest about it, I'd put me in hell. That's where I deserve to go, because I've seen some of the things I've done, what I deserve. But thanks be to God, He didn't think that way. And we have God the Son, who took on our human flesh and went to the cross so that we could receive eternal life with Him. Okay, that's our message. And it's free. F-R-E, free. Now, if you put a billboard up with the word free on it for anything else, you have people gathered around the block, up the road, you know, standing room only, and you got to put on 3 extra shows because it's free. But you say that with the gospel that promises eternal life with God, and people get cranky and try to kill you. Obviously, people are not mentally right in the head. And that has to be the influence of the evil one, the world, our own sinful flesh, working within us to fight the gospel. Because God, hey, here's eternal life for free. And we got to kill that guy. You know, that's how the world responds. You know, we need to put that guy out of our misery. So it's not just evolution, but it's all these other topics.
His misery.
So we have that. Brother, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just that Satan wants us to think in his terms that you have to earn your salvation. And you're not doing it, so you're going to be with me in hell. That's what he's
Yeah.
trying to get you to say.
Yeah,
He doesn't want to go there by himself.
that's right. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Next time, I want to get into apologetics, and I think next time will be my last lesson. And I want to get into something called apologetics. And I'll just give you a little preview. I just told you what our message is, salvation in Jesus Christ. And there will be people who have problems with that. And the role of apologetics in our life, we don't lead with apologetics, we lead with Jesus Christ. We lead with salvation. But sometimes somebody will come up and say, but what about this or that or that? And what I want to do next time is talk a little bit about that, how we can help people understand that we're not crazy because we believe in our Savior. That believing in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of sins and our eternal salvation is actually a very reasonable thing to do. I want to use up a whole session on that, so I want to have that available. Plus, I want to test out my audio-visual because I have a somewhat entertaining video that I want to show you next week. So, are there any questions on the overall topic as I've done it so far? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, apologetics. If you get the Lutheran Witness, September is full of that topic, so it's current for Lutherans. There's been other denominations have had it, but Lutherans have kind of.
Yeah, and I give you an example of what we shouldn't do. Bless their heart. Let's see, where was it? It was in Pekin. We drive through Pekin, and here'd be this big billboard. And up on this billboard is the word John 3:16. That's it. Now, if you're a pagan in our society and have never even seen a Bible, what do those words mean to you?
Nothing. Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. So, you watch a baseball game, hold up the sign, says John 3:16. How does that help anybody? I mean, bless their heart's in the right place, but they need to think it through. If I don't know that John 3:16 even refers to a book in the Bible, much less where it is, and I have no clue what John 3:16 says, what good? And they spent a lot of good money on that billboard, and it didn't do any good. The people who went by and said, "Yeah, John 3:16, they're already Christians."
Yeah.
And the people go by and say, "What kind of a cryptic message is John 3:16?" Honey, you know what they're talking about? You know,
If they're interested.
it's not there. So when we're doing apologetics with people, especially if we're doing apologetics in this day and age, again, I hate to keep bringing my daughter up as an example, but my daughter, while she was in college, she tutored other students. My daughter's halfway intelligent. So she was tutoring other students as a way to make
She might see that.
a little cash. And she said, "Dad, I have students who have never heard of the Bible. Not only do they not know Noah's Ark or Daniel and the Lion's Den or David and Goliath, but they just don't know what a Bible is. They just haven't, it just isn't part of their upbringing." See, I remember when I was in kindergarten in Muscatine. This is before the Supreme Court dates me, but you already know I'm old. Our kindergarten teacher would tell us Bible stories, and we would sing little hymns. And we learned about Jacob and his brothers, and we learned about Daniel and the lion's den. In kindergarten, in a public school. In a public school. This is before the Supreme Court decision. And that was because Zion and Muscatine didn't have a kindergarten, and my dad wanted me to go to kindergarten. So I went to public school kindergarten, and I came to Zion and Muscatine, which both my dad and I were very sad when they tore the school building down and converted it into a parking lot. But she was just saying, these people, like, half the metaphors, if you're reading some old speech by George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or whoever, And some of those guys weren't Christians. I mean, Thomas Jefferson wasn't a Christian. And yet they referred to the Bible because it was just part of their upbringing. When we're telling people about Christ, we must understand that these people have never touched a Bible. They've never been exposed to any biblical literature anywhere in their schooling. You know, we've got to be thinking, we're working in a pagan nation now. It's totally different than when we were kids. And so that's part of the apologetics process. We need to be able to present Jesus Christ to a person who has no clue what the Bible is.
Things haven't changed that much in the last 50, 60 years, so I still remember a humanities class I had to take in college, and the instructor would come in every day and just go on different philosophical topics and just blow through things. We got to midterms, she all of a sudden said, take a piece of paper out, it says, I want you to basically give me a synopsis of the book of Job. I was one of the few kids in the class that passed it, and it was just because of that. But most people say, Job?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, is there a job we need to do? You know? Yeah.
Well, you don't see a Bible sitting in Walmart. I mean, have you ever been any place where you sell a Bible? Why, nobody buy it. They weren't blessed to have the upbringing we've had.
Yeah.
I think of all the blessings, and you really have to start with my parents,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I can remember watching TV as a child, and it would be a public service announcement running late in the week. Don't forget to attend the church of your choice. That was actually broadcast on television. There's no way you'd see that today. So we've got to understand, we're growing up in a culture that has totally divorced itself from God, totally divorced itself from Jesus Christ. And when we tell people about Jesus Christ, we have to start out by assuming that they know nothing. So, you look like you want to say something, Mike.
No.
Okay. Okay. Any other topics? Questions, queries? All right, why don't we close with the Lord's Prayer?